In order to introduce you to Henry A. Wallace, I want to tell you about Bernie Sanders. If you're not in the United States, and a lot of our STARCARD podcast viewers are from around the planet, I can't tell you how impressed I am. This is really cool. Yeah, rock on. Woo! So anyway, if you don't know who Bernie Sanders is, he's a senator from Vermont. By the way, when I talk about Bernie Sanders, it's quite possible I might lose some viewers and subscribers. But there's some things that we can agree on about Bernie Sanders. He cares about the people, okay? He calls it like he sees it. Nobody owns him. He's not a corporate shill. He's got the same story from the 1980s as he does right now. He's not in it for the money. He's not in it to get rich. He's in it to, save the United States and, keep us on the right track. I remember the first time I heard this guy, he's a senator from Vermont. I heard him on public radio. This was way before he started running for president. And well, how come this guy doesn't run for president? He's the answer to everything. And then I know that, when it came around 2018 or 2019, whenever that election was, I was rooting for him also. And I know a lot of people were. He collected us a lot of small donations, but a great many number of small donations to bolster his campaign funds. But nevertheless, he's not actually a member of the Democratic Party. He's an independent. So the Democratic Party decided to go with one of their own. And anyway, the rest is history. But then right around 2020, stuff was going on and everyone was like, what do we do? What do we do? Nobody had been listening to Senator Bernie Sanders. He had the answers to everything about, taking care of society. Anyway, so you can tell I'm a big fan, whether you like it or not. I hope that you still like other parts of the show. But the reason why I mentioned Senator Bernie Sanders is because there was an American statesman named Henry A. Wallace. Everyone would know him as the vice president for Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And then I had to brush up a little on Mr. Wallace before I went on the air. He started a new progressive party. He was a third party candidate in that famous election between Truman and Dewey. And Truman won, right? And the newspapers called it wrong. So I know you're all imagining that famous picture of President-elect Truman holding the newspaper saying Dewey wins. Dewey was a governor from New York, by the way. But also, Mr. Wallace ran in that election because he was a third-party candidate. So that kind of reminds me of Bernie Sanders a little bit. And also, he was definitely a people person. And so anyway, let's check and make sure I got all my notes in order. I'm going to read to you what it says on the internet real quick about Henry A. Wallace. Yeah, I'm still here. Hang on. Okay, so Henry Wallace, he was born October 7th, 1888 in Iowa. All right, so he would have been older than my grandfather, and he was born in Iowa. And if you know anything about old world buildings and those famous photographs of old world buildings in Iowa after mud floods, okay, Mr. Wallace is probably going to have some kind of clue about what's going on just from growing up in Iowa, not to mention, going to Washington, D.C. later and getting involved in government, because he was also the Secretary of Agriculture. He was in the cabinet. So he passed away November 18th, 1965. He passed away like a year before I was born. Goes to show you how old I am, right? I'm as old as the Super Bowl. Okay, hang on a second. So I guess something that Henry Wallace is known for was that he wrote a letter to President Truman encouraging more cooperation with the Soviet Union. And, that's a very noble thing to do. But he was he was obviously the kind of person like Bernie Sanders. The corporations were not going to give that guy a leg up, okay, because he couldn't be bought. He seems to have had some integrity. I may not even agree with all the things he had to say. Remember, I grew up during the Cold War. Nevertheless, the older I get, the more I look at this gentleman, I feel like we got to give him another shake here at STARCARD Podcast. So I'm going to be inviting him in later to do a tarot press conference. Well, okay, so we talked about this before, how Martin Luther King Jr., okay, the famous civil rights activist here in the United States, he said that it's socialism for the top of society and it's ruthless capitalism for the rest of us, right? It's cutthroat capitalism down here for us on the bottom rungs of society. But for the very top, They get tax breaks. They don't pay the same kind of taxes we do. Okay. They might be paying a 10% rate or something like that with all their fancy loopholes, and 3 out of 5 days a week, we're paying taxes. So, that's for the work that we get. So number one, I'm getting all excited here. Okay, so yeah, it's socialism for the top society, just like Martin Luther King Jr. said, and it's cutthroat capitalism for the rest of us. And I would say, I know that if you've been following me a long time, I probably mentioned this. I'm going to look this up next time I talk about it. But I believe there was a leader in old Germany and I think it was Bismarck, but there was certainly a leader in old pre-World War Germany, 1800s Germany, who said that you need to have like some kind of accommodation plan for the elderly. You can't just say, oh, well, you can't work anymore. Well, you get no money. I guess you're out on the street unless your family can help you. You can't do that to people in your own society. That doesn't make sense at all. Okay. And you can't do that to people who contributed to your society already. They made your society strong. You can't abandon them. There's something ethically not appropriate about that. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Okay. You have a society, you need a little bit of socialism to keep the society going. So now I'm going to, get a little carried away and a little assertive and say, what if I'm a me person? I'm a me first person. I want to live in a gated community, and I'll just have people, bring me my food, deliver my stuff to me. Okay. Okay, that's not the real world. You're going to have to leave your gated community someday. And by the way, you don't think that person who's driving your food up is not going to spit in it before they give it to you? Okay? Treat others the way you want to be treated. Anyway, I hope that's not the case. I just made up a disgusting story. I guess you could tell I don't order delivery like that. So, moving on with my notes, what else have I got here? I mentioned Bismarck. Yeah, I mentioned Bismarck. I mentioned Henry Wallace. I mentioned Bernie Sanders. And I mentioned Martin Luther King Jr. I didn't mention Arkeem Ra, but he says the same thing. Okay, this whole anti-communism thing, the Red Scare, the McCarthyism from the 1950s. It looks like it was a psyop just to get us all scared, so that we don't think about, not only sharing amongst ourselves, besides just doing it in a charitable way, but organizing or keeping our government organized in such a way that nobody gets extra help making extra money. This is different than, the Roosevelt era, when things were contained more. And before the Glass-Steagall Act was destroyed in the 1990s. That was President Clinton. Anyway, I'm getting carried away with my geopolitics. Let's make sure I stay on my notes here. We're going to throw some cards for Henry A. Wallace in a second. Someone who probably recognized the old world, probably someone who understood what was going on around him at that time. During World War II. I don't think, let's pretend Henry Wallace did win the election and Truman didn't. I think exopolitics would have evolved. I don't think Henry Wallace would have been Paperclip. I think he would have been a problem. Nevertheless, let's see what else I got here. Yeah, I think I mentioned all those things. Okay, so now I get to go to the books. Here we go. Check this out. So I got out my Encyclopedia of Presidents and Their Times again. That was a fun book to look at. Okay, and then I looked up Henry Wallace, and he was in this book. Now, this book I think is late 1990s, maybe early 2000s. But then I want to remind everybody about this book. This is my history book from 8th grade from the 1970s. And this book is considerably thicker, right? Okay. But I use there's something, if you're born in the 21st century, you may not know about these things. Because we ended up not even getting a chance to talk about these things in schools my last couple of years. But this is something called an index. And, it's a big list by page of all the things that are in the book. So I looked up Henry A. Wallace, and he's not even in this gigantic 8th grade social studies book from the 1970s. The 1970s were only 20 years after McCarthyism, 20 years after the big Red Scare and World War II ended. We were steeped in the Cold War. So they didn't even mention Henry A. Wallace in the whole book. They may have mentioned the Progressive Party. I didn't check it out. So, but anyway, at this time that they printed this book, they felt, well, we could mention him, and that's what they did. There were no pictures of him. So let me see what I found in this book to share with you about Henry Wallace that gets me all excited here. I think what was on page 148. Yeah. All right. So yeah, sorry everybody. Gonna have to hold the book upside down so I can read it here. Okay. It was the Agricultural Adjustment Act of May 1933, which attempted to raise prices by cutting production. It authorized the government to pay farmers for taking land out of cultivation. This seemed a cruel thing to do while millions of people were starving in the cities. But Secretary of Agriculture Henry Wallace argued that farmers simply were not able to make a living any other way. Agriculture, he said, cannot succeed in a capitalist society as a philanthropic enterprise. So basically he was saying farming can't just be done by charity. You have to pay the farmers. Anyway, he's well aware of what capitalism entails, and he's not scared to discuss a definition of it. Okay, we've got 2 more pages. 158. Sorry, that would be 156. Here we go. So check this out. It was campaign 1944. This is where I'm reading right here. Okay. So this is the end of the Franklin Delano Roosevelt era. And you can see Henry S. Truman is on deck. We're not looking at Mr. Truman today. But anyway, I'm going to read to you this little part here that involves Henry Wallace. Okay, after 12 difficult years as president, Roosevelt's health was clearly failing. I totally want to read this in my 1940s radio guy voice. Although they were certain to nominate him for a 4th term, most Democrats suspected that in choosing Roosevelt's running mate, they were choosing the next president. Because of strong opposition to incumbent Vice President Henry Wallace, whom some delegates considered a socialist, Roosevelt replaced him with Senator Harry Truman of Missouri. So Henry Wallace was regarded too much as a socialist, so they figured Truman would be a better pick as vice president because of Roosevelt's failing health. He was likely to, end up taking over for the term. And that's actually what happened. And then the last page I have here, 160. All right, and now it's campaign 1948. Here we go. Campaign 1948. And you can see the big commie scare, communists invade South Korea. That's coming up after the campaign of 1948 here. I'm going to be checking out this part here again with Henry Wallace. All right. Meanwhile, the radical Roosevelt wing of the Democratic Party, upset with Truman's tough stance on the Soviet Union, put up Henry Wallace, FDR's second vice president, as the candidate of the Progressive Party. Wallace promoted peace with the Soviet Union and opposed the Marshall Plan as a disguised attempt by U.S. corporations to take over Europe. Okay, I almost want to read that one again. It was pretty much Operation Paperclip for Europe, where the corporations take over the government. Which, by the way, reminds me of the George W. Bush era, when we were busy making the biggest outpost of the United States in the middle of the country of Iraq. And basically, we were giving no bid contracts to a company called Halliburton. Again, corporations taking over the government. There are a lot of changes ahead, and with intent, good intent, the intent to float everybody's boat, we can make things better just by talking about them and thinking about them here on this podcast and on others and throughout your day. So thanks for letting me share all that. And you know who I think has an opinion on all this? How about Henry A. Wallace? Let's invite him back. I mean, if he could, right? If I'm if he could, if it's, if I'm really doing magic here at STARCARD Podcast with the tarot cards, what would Henry Wallace say about our situation right now, in regards to the old world and what it looks like going forward? We're going to invite former Vice President Henry A. Wallace in to speak with the tarot cards. Someone who understands the 20th century, lived through most of it, remembers the 19th century, lived a life surrounded by old world buildings. I want to thank Henry Wallace for sticking up for everybody and setting a good example and advocating for peace. And even running for president, that's a big deal. That's a big sacrifice. So, Mr. Wallace, we invite you to speak to us today. If you have any positive messages, things that we could focus on, especially considering the topics we just brought up. Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Mr. Wallace, Vice President under Roosevelt, educated, humanitarian, and then, okay, one more. All right, let's give this a try. This is for entertainment purposes only. Any messages from Henry Wallace, please? So this is almost like a one-card thing in a way. Luck is where preparation meets opportunity. That goes for him as an individual. It goes for us as a country. Do we want to get lucky? Do we want to see good things on the horizon? We do have to prepare. We do have to take care of ourselves first. Yes. Like it. Next up, all right, the Hanged Man card shows up. And I don't know if you saw, but I had to flip it upside down a second there. But the Hanged Man tells us to take another look at something, right? But then if it's really reversed, I think I need to see the reverse meaning a second, because there might be another clue for us there. The Hanged Man says, pause, surrender, letting go, new perspective, viewing things differently than before. But the reversed Hangman says delays, standstill, resistance, stalling, indecision, fear of sacrifice, and lack of control. I'm going to put this Hangman reversed. Fear of sacrifice, lack of control. I mean, that's how I'm sure a lot of us feel in the United States. We're always sacrificing. How much more do we have to sacrifice? And, where's the control? Things seem to be off the rails, right? Anyway, we got to remember, luck is where preparation meets opportunity. Let's just keep planning. Keep our eyes out. Next up, Judgment Day is here, says the Judgment card. Judgment is about swapping out old energies and bringing in new energies. That could be a message from Mr. Wallace. Okay, we're gonna have to sacrifice. We can't be scared because there's a big change coming on. Even he from his dramatic his time in history, he recognizes our dramatic time in history. It must be dramatic if people are tuning into STARCARD Podcast to get some information about it. All right, good for you. Ooh. So there's going to be a lot of pain involved, says the Three of Swords. All right. We have to keep working at it. Keep our eye on what we call those American ideals. We have to be willing to sacrifice. And we can't be fearing that there's no control, because energies balance themselves out. But yeah, we have to acknowledge there's some pain going on. Not everybody has what they need in our country. It's really sad. I know that's happening around the world, but there's no need for that. There's plenty for everybody. So, public recognition is the Six of Wands card. And anyway, this makes me think of Vice President Wallace in a parade. Maybe he was in the inaugural parade. Sure. Wow. Next up, we have the Queen of Cups. The Queen of Cups is the card of empathy and caring. Let's see what it says on the Queen of Cups. Compassion, comfort, calm, nurturing, emotionally stable, intuitive. I like that compassion. You know, we have to be publicly compassionate. We have to recognize that even, you know, people in our own cities need help. You know, act locally, think globally. Anyway, the Ace of Cups, there's promise there. There's so much for everybody. It's overflowing the cup. The Ace of Cups reads, love, compassion, creativity, new feelings, spirituality, intuition, new baby, proposal, and marriage. Hey, everybody, I heard the words intuition and compassion with both of these cards. Intuition, compassion, publicly. You know, we say intuition, use logic. You don't need intuition to figure out people need help. Show compassion. That sounds like a socialist. And make it soon. Do it now, says the Eight of Wands. There's your message from former Vice President Wallace. Thank you, sir. That was awesome. Publicly, be intuitive and compassionate. Do it right now. Whatever that means to you, okay? Mr. Wallace is giving you a great suggestion. We should consider it our marching orders. Thank you again, sir. And our final card. Yeah, the Sun card says everything's going to be all right. All right. Woo, that's like the Tarot World showing off. Thank you, Mr. Wallace, and thank you, Tarot World. Another exciting tarot throw. Look, I'm having like a big emotional experience here. Just like the other day when we did Kurt Cobain, I was sobbing off camera, right? Wow, this was something else. All right, very nice. Let me give these cards a toss.